issue for as long as I can remember, and I don't think there's a more important one before us, you know. So I'd really take my hat off to you for keeping your eye on the ball, as it were. And I'm really going to look forward to finding out what you've been up to. And congratulations on the film. It looks like a really good one. Welcome to our mini studio.
Thank you.
It's really good to see you again, as always. And if we could come to a one-shot, I would think, that we could introduce the guest, and that's Mr. Kevin Saunders, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the program, to Conversations, where it's a real pleasure to welcome to the program a personal guest and a personal friend of myself, Harold Channer, have been Kevin Saunders. He's also a friend of the world, I would say. And Kevin, welcome very, very much to Conversation. Real pleasure to welcome you to our mini studio.
Well, after an introduction like that, I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say.
Yes, right. Anyway, we've known each other a long time, and you have consistently been interested in this issue that is before us on this program today, that being the bomb and the destructive capability that exists. I know you've been following that. We're going to talk about that, and we got some clips from the film you put together, the people versus the bomb. Showdown at the UN, which is a very provocative title and everything. But maybe you could. We've done it before, Kevin. Maybe you could share just briefly your own background. I know you're out of Australia and that, but some of your own background. Then we'll get into the sub and substance of the film, show a couple of clips and so forth. But please, your background?
Well, essentially, it's that of a reporter, and specifically, mainly in television, but in radio too. In fact, I started in radio. Now I'm back to radio in the sense that I do a lot of work on One World Radio.
I'm aware,
admirable enterprise put together with some support from The Guardian in England, BBC, and they started a One World service, One World, One Word. And it's radio, and now they're moving more and more to TV.
They are, okay.
As are you. I mean, you're an example.
Well, yeah, I've never been on radio, you know, although I do talk all the time. But
no, they're catching up with you.
Oh, well, I think they're way ahead of me in many ways. They're all over the world in a consistent way.
Well, in that they're using the new medium of the digital age and the internet, through which soon everything will move.
I think I agree with you.
All communications.
Yeah, I know.
Films, radio, telephone, all of it will move through the internet.
I think that's true. We had a fellow, Dom Serafini. Did you ever know Dom? He put out the Video Age International, really good magazine. He said that the internet's very rapidly going multimedia. Right. He's very knowledgeable with the big players and so forth. But he said it's very rapidly going, and there'll be 4 screens upon which all the stuff will appear. It's going to be the movie screen, the television screen, the computer screen, and the cell phone screen. They're even getting it down to the cell phone. And it is moving pretty rapidly with the expansion of broadband and so forth into multimedia. So I think that is a harbinger or a source of great hope to bring some sort of new pattern to the world if one thinks that's needed. I certainly do, and I think you do too.
I think on one of your earlier programs I quoted, as I so often do, something Stuart Brand, Whole Earth Review, said, we're going to spend the next 100 years just working out things to do with limitless bandwidth.
Yes,
and we are moving toward that very rapidly.
Yeah, limitless bandwidth is a metaphor for abundance. They had that Sloan Commission report. Do you remember that way back in the early 70s? And they took a measure of the cable television, which was bringing something beyond what the cable, over the air allowed in terms of the market penetration. And they said cable television, the medium of abundance. And now it's going so rapidly. They're getting, it's just every time you turn around, they're getting down close to molecular computing. They're getting down to terabit kinds of on 1 inch, a circuit, that kind of. It's just expanding so rapidly, and it's going almost exponentially. And it's a source of great good hope, I think. And the general theme of abundance is a very interesting one if you posit it against a world historic condition, not only in communication, maybe in a larger sense, of sufficiency to meet the needs of our species and perhaps ecological needs in a new and unique way coming out of history, possibly. I don't know. It seems to me that's one question on the obverse side of the destructive scenario, which is so much before us now. But we may be transcending scarcity in a certain kind of way that just has not been available to us out of history.
That's right, and I think we are at a threshold of moving into a genuine new age, the age of abundance. The phrase you've used is probably pretty well targeted, because the idea of limitless bandwidth and limitless, virtually free energy.
That's coming with fusion, maybe,
right.
or they got a fusion thing going in France now, I see, and yeah.
Well, that changes everything.
Yeah.
So yes, and so I'm glad I've lived long enough just to sort of see the glimmer of what lies ahead.
Yeah, I think it's true. This is an exciting time,
right.
a qualitative transformation, perhaps, in the evolution of affairs. It's an incredibly
right.
exciting time to be alive and participant.
So to take back to your,
yes,
your question, what I'm doing now is one of the few original laws I have proposed is that. In media, when in doubt, do everything.
Yes.
Because in a sense, radio, if the program can be done on TV, it can also be made radio compatible.
Yeah, sure.
And can
just
also
get the
be,
audio track.
Right, be put on television and radio and on the internet. Now, because audio and video are now transmittable on radio. So the program I've been working on, the one we're talking about now, it's designed as a television program, but I'm going to re-edit it to make it radio compatible.
Sure.
And
in a unique way, do you think, or will it be a unique thing for the radio, or will you just take the soundtrack and put that on radio?
No,
do you do it differently for radio?
It has to be done.
All right, yeah.
Because in television, you can let the titles do a lot of work for you.
That's right. And the images.
Right.
And just the images.
Right. So when somebody comes up speaking, they are there, they can be seen, and their name, Bill Smith, director of ABC, is there in front of them. Whereas on radio, one has to each time reintroduce them, saying, as Bill Smith from ABC Radio said, and then you run the... So it's a minor change.
No, but it's
but one must be aware of it.
Yeah, it might be, and because you're doing radio now, but you've done a lot of television. I think it might be worth mentioning. You came out of Australia. It's Channel 4, was it, or Channel 7? You were with there, and then you were CNN for a while. You were with ABC, and of these mainline television experience you've had also.
Right, and CNN, and
you were there at the beginning of CNN, I think.
Briefly, I've actually done a couple of programs for the early Fox, not the Fox News, the early Fox Network. The first documentary they made, which was about space, Footsteps of Giants, it was called.
Did you narrate that? Did you direct it? Or?
No, I actually produced it.
Oh, good for you. Good for them, yeah. So, how long was that piece?
That was an hour.
Oh, good. Yeah, okay.
So I've worked in the existing old media, as they say, old Europe, old media, and I'm also working on the edges of new media.
Yeah, right. You certainly are. You have
discovering it,
and you've been following it. Mr. Barlow, is that his name? Somebody, John?
Yes.
Somebody Barlow. You put me in touch with, who said that he saw the frontiers and the significance of all of this. You followed that carefully, and you followed this question of nuclear proliferation and nuclear destructive capability with a dogged determination, and for that I congratulate you enormously. I remember doing programs with you from the lawyers of atomic energy,
Alan Ware,
and then Weiss, I think, is involved
Peter
with
Weiss.
that. Peter Weiss and that kind of thing. You've been involved with that all along, and I congratulate. And that's what your film you're working on now is involved with, the non-proliferation treaty.
It is about a specific event, which passed virtually unnoticed in the mainstream media, particularly in America. It was almost ignored.
Just a couple of months ago from now.
In May of 2005, an extraordinarily important event took place at the United Nations. The 2005 review of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which perhaps it's worth reminding people was developed in 1968, signed in 1970. The overwhelming majority of the world's nations at the United Nations, it took place at the United Nations, although technically it's not a United Nations treaty. But the agreement was arrived at by the overwhelming majority of the world's nations, including the 5 then nuclear powers, that they, the nuclear powers, would get rid of their nuclear bombs. Not just disarm down to a few, but get rid of them. Abolition. Complete elimination of nuclear
And was there a
weapons.
timetable set for that, or
No,
contingency, or what?
that, alas, was one of the problems. But the understanding was that they would move with dispatch to do this. It was assumed that this would happen in a matter of years, not decades, and certainly not centuries.
Yes, right.
But the assumption was that when the nuclear engineers and the nuclear bomb makers began making their bombs, they had plenty of plans for building more bombs.
Right.
They never planned, they nor the governments that ordered them to do this, none ever even thought about planning to get rid of the bombs. So when
that armament thing has been a one-way street, hasn't it?
Right.
I mean, the musket became the rifle, became the Gatling gun,
Right.
became the tank, became the, and it's just been one way.
Right.
And that's been the leading edge of so much scientific and technological development.
That's right, more was better,
Yeah.
more was better was
More
the
is
underlying
better. It makes us
assumption.
more powerful against our enemies, and that.
But
sort of
when
thing,
a quantitatively and qualitatively different kind of bomb
Yeah.
came into effect,
Yeah.
that no longer applied.
Okay, it's a big issue. Something new is there that we
Right.
have to take into account, right?
And just one nuclear bomb is a bad thing. 60,000 nuclear bombs, as at one stage there were, under the in the height of the Cold War.
Yeah.
At one time during the Reagan administration, there were on the planet 60,000 usable nuclear bombs.
How many of them are there now?
One wishes could be as exact as possible, but alas, there's some uncertainty about this, but the figure that's generally used now is 35,000.
35,000.
35,000.
Usable.
35,000 usable bombs.
There were 60.
There were 60.
What happened to the 30,000?
They were dismantled.
Uh-huh.
Some have been genuinely destroyed.
Uh-huh.
Destroyed to the extent that the molds to make them were publicly broken. This happened under the Carter administration.
Okay.
That they actually broke the molds for some of the bombs. And for a while, in its own rather snail pace, disarmament, the nuclear disarmament was proceeding. But now, under the Bush administration in the United States, that has come to a virtual halt.
He has seemed to ignore the Non-Proliferation Treaty, it seems to me, among others.
Right.
Kyoto and so forth.
Right. The Non-Proliferation Treaty in the year 2000 achieved a considerable and historic agreement. And it was not easily achieved. But the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference, which is held every 5 years, in the year 2000 arrived at an agreement which included the phrase a commitment to get all nuclear weapons out of the world, to eliminate nuclear weapons entirely. An unequivocal commitment to total nuclear disarmament. Now, that is something...
In the year 2000?
In the year 2000, under the Clinton administration,
Clinton was still in, yeah.
that agreement was reached. And there was exhilaration among
among us.
among the world's
People.
the world's peoples,
Yes.
and those overwhelming majority of the world's nations who do not have nuclear weapons and don't want nuclear weapons and wish everybody who has them would get rid of them. So that was an historic turning point.
Yeah.
Now, when the next nuclear non-proliferation treaty
Just
conference,
happened a couple of months ago,
which
in this
occurred in 2005 in
Right.
May, came
Yeah.
along, the pace of disarmament had slowed to a virtual halt. And the Bush administration had made it known that they wished to disengage from those agreements.
Right. Among many other
Right.
agreements that have been in international law.
Because among the other agreements that were arrived at in 2000 was an agreement to sign to halt testing, the comprehensive test ban treaty.
Right.
And to re-endorse the anti-ballistic missile treaty.
Right, another, yeah.
Now, all of these things have now been abandoned by the Bush administration.
And it just, we're now able to announce that Mr. Bolton's going to be our representative to the UN, which in many circles seems almost like an, almost an absurd joke.
Right. It is a huge crisis has emerged as a result of this.
Yeah.
And the treaty ended in the year 2005, last May. It ended for the first time without an agreement. And in what had happened, what was the strategy of the United States, very effective and very skillfully carried out, was to block, to log jam the proceedings in such a way that there was not even a discussion of the agreements that were arrived at in the year 2000. Now, they haven't been abandoned officially, but for all intents and purposes, the United States government has announced that it's going to completely ignore these earlier understandings, threatening the whole structure of international law and international agreements.
A lot of people feel they've done that on a broad front, the whole structure of international law. Hard won over the years when nationalism has been so in the fore and hardcore realpolitik notions and so forth have been the norm for so many hundreds of years and so forth. And some of those, Universal Declaration of Human Rights and some other of the treaties and protocols that make up international law, hard won, up Mount Sisyphus, trying to get some sort of a context of commonality among the peoples of the world are being sort of ignored. Right. And thrown into a thing where just national interest and realpolitik
in the course of the
emerging in the United States.
In the course of the program, which tentative title is People versus the Bomb, Showdown at the UN.
Right. Because that's where it takes place.
Right. The People versus the Bomb was the title of an earlier program I made in 1996 in The Hague.
Yes, I remember.
In Holland, where the World Court, and another historic event, the World Court actually issued an opinion after 2 weeks of hearings on the legality of nuclear weapons. And the World Court finally issued an opinion that they were illegal in any circumstance they could imagine. And further, that there existed an obligation on the part of the nuclear weapon states to, quote, bring to a conclusion complete nuclear disarmament. And in the program which I've made on the latest, the 2005 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
That's the one we're going to show a clip from, a couple of clips from.
Among others, I did a number of interviews, and one of them with Justice Christopher Weir-Mantry, former Vice President of the World Court. I believe you've actually interviewed him.
I did an hour with him. We aired it a couple months ago.
Man.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
And he says flatly that the nuclear powers are in violation of world law.
I think they're in violation of world law on many fronts.
Right.
Yeah.
And to have it specifically stated, I think, is important.
I think John Bolton actually believes that much of that international law is something to be avoided or discarded.
Yes, simply ignored.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
they've got now. I can remember back in 1954, Mr. Kissinger wrote that book on tactical nuclear weapons. They're now talking about bunker busters, bombs with atomic warheads that can go penetrate into the earth to use tactically nuclear weapons.
That's right. They're thinking now in terms of
very dangerous,
usable nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, formerly there was a kind of moral taboo. Yes, we have them, but we only have them so that they need never be used.
Right.
That now has changed.
Mad, mutually assured destruction. Yeah.
So now the American government, the Bush administration, is clearly talking about developing nuclear weapons for use, to be used for specific purposes.
Right.
And that sort of abandons all restraints, and the slippery slope is there, and who knows where it may be.
I wonder if we can back. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, which is why this is real alarm. There was shock, horror, outrage, fury at times, and alarm at the United Nations as it became clear toward the end of the 4 weeks of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Review Conference in May that there would be no statement. And that the United States really would ignore and had decided to ignore it. And as a result, now, you know, somebody said the only important philosophical question is what to do next.
Yeah.
So what is to be done now?
Yeah, right.
And that's a challenging question,
Yeah.
which the world's people, and particularly the civil society of the world, is very actively working on now. There are a number of fronts. One is, well, an important development. The world's mayors,
Indeed, yeah.
1,000.
Aaron Tovish and the
Right.
mayor of Nagasaki, or
Right.
Hiroshima particularly, yeah.
Yes.
And Nagasaki, yeah.
The mayors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki headed up a Mayors for Peace delegation
Yes.
of some hundreds of mayors who came to New York to be present, to take part in the NPT conference.
Right.
And they did.
And they did. They had a demonstration in Central
Huge,
Park.
40,000 people came to Central Park.
There were that many, okay.
And it was a very, very important, very, exciting that here were the world's peoples and their representatives at the grassroots level.
At the grassroots, the mayoral level.
Not nation states,
That's
not
right.
senators, but mayors.
It is interesting. The
the
mayoral,
voices of the people.
right? The mayoral level
Right.
is closer to the people
That's right.
than our legislature and
Much-
the capitals,
it's a
or
real
much
grassroots.
less the executive branch. Yeah, it really is.
I mean,
and
I-
the people of the world want things that the leaders may not
Right.
think is possible. That kind of thing.
Right, the
That's an
closer you get to the
interesting
nation
theme.
state, you get further away from the people.
That's right.
And the mayors are closer to the people. And 1,000 mayors are members of the Mayors for Peace.
Right. Right.
So they represent many hundreds of millions of people around the world, and
Right.
they represent them directly. And they are calling for a complete abolition of nuclear weapons by the year 2020.
2020 Vision 2020.
Vision 2020
yeah.
is their
Right,
plan.
right,
I mean, they have a schedule and a plan,
Right.
and have thought this through, and they're very passionate about it.
Now, what about that thing that the people, your program is the people against the bomb. You could say the people against the mafia dons who own the bomb.
Yes.
You might take that kind of a view in terms of what they're fighting. People have been fighting. We've been around 200,000 years, Homo sapiens sapien apparently. We had Cro-Magnon caves and people, and there's been a relentless move. I just got an article I read the other day. J.C. Kapoor, I don't know if you know him. He's got a journal called International Affairs out of India, a real scholar. And he had one fellow there who was a UN Morris Miller. And he had written an article where he said they figured it out on all of the sweep of human history, and they had a definition of war and that sort of thing. And the point being is he thought there was only something like 268 years out of all of recorded history that was not engaged in a serious war. So war has been, in a certain sense,
The natural state of man,
the
it might
natural
seem,
order
yes.
of mankind, and it's been technology and war. What has happened, if anything, that signals we may be at a point where what has applied through all of history somehow can be stopped in its tracks, and we can go into some sort of a new course or a new understanding? Does it need be some sort of a positive? Maybe I could park that for a minute. You've been following this for a long time. If the weapons were in some spasm of hatred to be unleashed, Sarajevo or something like that, how destructive are they? If you take into account nuclear weapons, we only have 35,000 now instead of 60,000. Is it possible, if there was an unleashing of the destructive capability that does exist in our weapon system, is it possible to say now that within scientific parameters of understanding or modeling of what we've done, that it could very well mean the end of our whole species? Or is that hyperbole? Is that something that is not correct? Are we still in a course where we can tolerate things like we did in the Second World War, Dresden firebombing, that kind of thing, all those deaths that occurred? But are we at a point where existentially we could destroy our whole species, or do we know, and where are the best sources to get a fix on that? And if that is the case, what on the that existential change from historical condition out of which we come, what on the positive side of the evolution of events and extensions of technology could weigh against that would be equally existentially significant, making peace possible in a way that peace has never been with us throughout the human experience? First question first. How destructive are the weapon systems that exist? Is it species lethal?
Yes.
They are.
Short answer, simply yes.
Okay, we know that. We can demonstrate. Who's the best source to go to make that clear, and why isn't that up in the consciousness of everybody in a position of responsibility or even questioning responsibility.
Well, you may recall the late Carl Sagan.
Yes.
Worked on a project, or was one of the scientists involved in a project that produced the concept of nuclear winter.
I remember there was controversy whether or not it was correct.
Right.
The findings.
And by the way, Richard Pearl at the time when he was working in the Defense Department at the time, and extraordinary quotation. He said in hearings about nuclear winter, he said, but, well, even if it is true that this could happen, the only way to deal with this, the appropriate way to deal with this is to get more bombs so that it will make their use less likely. I mean, this is the insane kind of logic
strange
of the bomb makers. It's strange love, but yes, if we're discovering more and more the dangers of nuclear radiation itself, not just in the immediate, but in the long term, in the very long term, it's the erosion of the species and the final destruction of the species as a thinking, rational, functioning the human species.
Of their use.
Yeah, right. The consequence
of their all-out use.
Oh, that's right. And here's the problem is, if one is used, it's the idea that one or two or a few
or a tactical
can be
bunker
used
buster.
discreetly.
Yes,
is dangerously fanciful, because once you open it up, everybody will start producing bombs. Everyone will get bombs, including terrorists. There are enough around already to make it a serious problem, a
lot of leakage out of the Soviet Union.
Right,
people,
And once nuclear bombs are used, and one accepts that they're legitimate weapons, then there's a cascade effect that could result quite easily in the devastation, the complete destruction of the human species and a great many other forms of life on the planet.
Right.
And
we got bacteriological things and germ things and so forth. So maybe we're getting into a point which is something different than what we've been in we've been protected in our impotence in a certain sense as we gestated for 200,000 years, and we sort of reached an end point of that where we developed the musket, and then we developed the Gatling gun, and then we developed the tank, and we developed increased weapon systems, greater firepower, ability to fight. We've reached a certain kind of end point, it would seem, in terms of the efficacy
it happened
by
quite
which
suddenly.
We've been settling affairs in the 200,000 years of human history. So it's an existential challenge that makes this time something different than what historically we're coming out of.
Well, the vast majority of the world seems to have arrived at the sensible conclusion that nuclear weapons are a very dangerous thing and shouldn't be used and should be abolished. 60% of the human population, 60% of people in America, even in the nuclear weapons countries, an overwhelming majority of the people are in favor of getting rid of nuclear weapons. And so a few governments, 10 by number, it isn't even governments, it's certain leaders. The leaders, there are, as I said, 35,000 nuclear bombs in the world. They are in the hands of 10 fiercely competitive world leaders. And any one of them is in a position to start it, to push a button and start a war. And the overwhelming majority of the world's leaders and the world's peoples want to change that, see that as a perilous situation, uniquely perilous,
now
which it is.
These kings or mafia dons, we said before, the people that have fought, it's always been from Roman Empire times. You had a few people running everything, you had a few leaders running things, emperors, and then you had Alexander the Great, and you had all these kind of leaders, and you have a small group that runs things, and most of the people are like serfs, or they're treated almost like slaves in many cases like that. It's been always a few people who run things apart. The people have never really had a say. We say we have democracy. We don't really have democracy. We have a very truncated kind of notion of democracy where people have a ability to participate and so forth. So they are going to fight, and they're going to take every advantage they can, because that's the history of, what has changed that might make peace possible among the peoples of the world where it has not been possible throughout, I mean, or is it necessary that something in the zeitgeist or something in the overall context of human affairs, or maybe the technological capability has changed? We started this program talking about abundance, about being able to see an abundant communication possibility. There might be design capabilities of making things abundant for the world population. This percentage of the world population who can be seen to be haves has grown through our technological development. If we get a right system, a right template for operating the world, do we need some sort of a positive vision of some altered capability that we collectively have if we're to achieve peace? We see people marching over the decades saying no justice, no peace. We have no justice. We don't have a just system. A lot of the blowback is because we don't have a just. Are we going to be able to have peace if we don't have justice, or is there a possibility that in a really qualitative kind of liberating context for all of humanity and its creatures, we may be coming to a time where we will have a really just order rather than the truncated justice that we've had to live with throughout history?
Oh, it could happen very suddenly and very easily.
Like punctuated equilibrium in evolution, maybe.
Well, you know, the accidents of fate. Let me consider, well, I've always said one should never begin any sentence with if only, because the conversation is then a waste of time.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, just to make my point.
If only.
If only, if only John Kerry had won the last election. There is no doubt whatever that he personally would have come to the United Nations, have taken a leading role in encouraging the other nuclear powers and leading the world in nuclear disarmament. He's very sophisticated about this. He understands very well the problems and the challenges and the mechanics of this, and it's something that is very important to him.
60,000 votes in
so
in
that's
Ohio.
right.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right. That's how small these differences are.
Yeah.
I mean, accidents of history.
Yeah.
Let me bore you with further.
Not
with
at all,
an accident
not
of history that made the last century such a mess. Gregory Bateson, the great Gregory Bateson, once said...
Steps to an ecology of mind.
Right.
Great mind, yeah.
He once said that one of the greatest, if not the greatest event in the last century was the Treaty of Versailles, wherein, because of an accident of history where President Wilson was seriously ill at the time of the treaty, and therefore the whole operation was seized by a small group of fanatic American nationalists who broke the agreements that they had settled in advance to follow and betrayed the Germans, and as a result Germans suffered tremendous depression,
Set a great
tremendous
context for the
resentment,
emergence of Mr. Hitler.
and the emergence of Hitler, which in turn led to the emergence of the nuclear bomb.
Yeah, right.
Nobody would have built a nuclear bomb
if
it hadn't have been the fear of Hitler's Germany. And ironically, Hitler wasn't building the bomb.
Right.
And so when they had already started building the bomb, then shifted it to Japan, and then America decided to keep it to threaten the Russians, who in turn then started building it, and so the whole nuclear arms race. These accidents of history.
I know, like butterfly wings.
So, in fact, at the end of the NPT, as gloom was settling over the whole anti-nuclear movement there, Theodore Sorensen made a very thoughtful speech. And he said, the hope is that democracy can adapt, that democracy is an adaptable system at its best. And he said, and a leader now is not going to be a leader necessarily for the foreseeable future. And a change of leadership could again put America in a position where a leader could step forward and very clearly take position. The first thing, for example, a leader should do should be to take all those nuclear weapons that are still on high hair trigger alert.
Take them off high trigger alert.
And that is something that was repeated again and again. The shocking situation, here after the Cold War, we still have, the United States has, and Russia has, each 2,500 nuclear weapons.
On hair trigger.
On hair trigger alert. They're on missiles. The missiles at all times.
Ready to go.
Fully fueled.
One little button.
The
that has to be pushed with a
gyroscope
finger,
navigators, whirring at all times, ready to launch in a matter of minutes. This is an insane situation. As Carl Sagan said, the ultimate result of science has been to booby-trap the planet for destruction.
Yes, we got rid of landmines. Why can't we get rid of those atomic mines?
And if we might, if we can take a couple of people who were speaking about this. I mean, everyone, I brought it up again and again in the program, and the speakers there, ranging all the way from Helen Caldicott, the great anti-nuclear activist, who was one of the first speakers on behalf of the NPT NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, and
been there forever.
As it were, in almost another entirely different domain, Robert McNamara, the man who really was there at the center of the, as near as America has actually come to actually launching nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He is very aware of the terror. And both of them were speakers at the program. There is a short bite from the program.
Maybe that's it. These are so interesting questions. I talk too much and everything, but we want to get to some clips. You have a clip.
I think they answer some of the points.
Let's see if it does. So maybe we could set it up. This is a clip. Do it real quick. It's one of the pieces from there that Taz Caldicott.
It leads into Helen Caldicott, and then I do a brief introduction from the studios there, and then Robert McNamara speaks.
Well, let's run that. Just run for a couple of minutes, and we'll come back and try and get another one. We've got to start getting some of this footage in. So we're talking with Kevin Saunders in a piece from his film, People versus the Bomb, Showdown at the UN.
Right.
So let's run that piece now then, please. Thank you.
Important conference the United Nations has ever held. I think from what you've heard now, we are on the brink of annihilation. Russia and America on hair trigger alert. Certain diplomats have told me, high diplomats, that they've thought we've never been closer to the annihilation of life on the planet. Please take this responsibility seriously, I beg you, as a physician representing global public health.
The shadow of the Cold War still hangs over the United Nations and the world. Even now, more than 10 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the governments of the two major nuclear powers, the United States and Russia, still have 30,000 nuclear bombs and keep 5,000 bombs ready to launch on hair-trigger alert. Right now they stand, ready to aim in a matter of seconds on millions of people in cities around the world.
The danger facing the world today with respect to nuclear weapons is far greater than most political leaders and most military leaders, most civilian security experts really understand. If they were, they would not tolerate what's going on in the NPT conference today. Now, as we speak, the U.S. has deployed about 6,000 strategic nuclear warheads. And of the 6,000, 2,000 are on hair-trigger alert, ready to launch on 15-minute warning by the decision of one man, the President of the United States. This is a very, very dangerous situation, and the Russians presumably have essentially the same number of warheads and the same procedures. If I were to characterize U.S. and NATO policies in one sentence, at the risk of appearing simplistic and provocative, I would say they're immoral, illegal, militarily unnecessary, very, very dangerous in terms of accidental or inadvertent use, and destructive of the non-proliferation regime that has served us so well for 40 years.
Well, that's really something. That's McNamara saying it served us so well, and it's here. You know, it's really something. They've got this. It's almost absurd in a way that they can't come to some sort of agreement on this. I think you know, that's really good. We want to make sure we get another piece in here about that.
One of the problems is that, as one of the ambassadors, and a number of the ambassadors actually said, one of the problems is the people. The people are not really informed. It's that they have not become engaged, because again and again, people are astonished to learn that, well, that all of these weapons are on hair-trigger alert even now.
Right.
Or somehow the idea was, well, the Cold War was over.
Exactly.
Everything is solved. Let's forget about it.
Well, Mr. Fukuyama wrote, the end of history, it's all over. We've won, the good guys have won, and we have a pattern and so forth, but a lot of the world does not seem to agree with that, which makes it even more dangerous in a certain sense, because the more and more people are getting weapons. India, Pakistan now, this kind of thing, and it's getting more dangerous than it was even during the period of mutually assured destruction. It's really very, very troubling. Yeah.
There is a growing sense, too, among the other nations, the vast majority of the world's nations, the non-nuclear states, that there's nothing's going to happen with the Bush administration, that therefore they will have to act around the United Nations, around the United States. Canada is taking a very strong stand here and emerging along with Sweden and New Zealand as the sort of middle power nations. In fact, the Middle Power Initiative, the New Agenda Coalition, as it's sometimes called, is a group of such nations. And they're led by a Canadian, Douglas Roche, Senator Douglas Roche.
I think you have some of that in the tape, don't you?
Yes, he was very active there, and he expresses the concerns, and particularly the concerns that now have been shaped by the sudden emergence of terrorism. And the two of them together, all these nuclear weapons, weapons on high trigger alert, and the threat of terror, it's created an incredible situation. And he talks about that at some length.
Okay, well listen, one of the problems you don't have enough time, huge subject, largest subject there is on the planet, it seems to me you're dealing with, but why don't we make sure we get that in a piece from your footage? You have another insert here. We're talking with Kevin Saunders. We want to make sure we get this other insert in. So let's set that up and run that now, then, please, and then we'll come back and finish out at the end. Okay, Kevin Saunders, his film is, again, The People versus the Bomb, Showdown at the UN. Just put on pause. That's all right.
Canadian delegation when I was ambassador to the NPT review of 1985, and I followed it very closely ever since, and I think the crisis that the NPT is passing through now is the worst. The entry into the second nuclear age, by which the major nuclear weapon states are cementing their nuclear weapons into their military doctrines. This is a modernizing of nuclear weapons. It is acting as a spur to other countries. And the refusal of the nuclear weapon states to recognize that their contribution to the instability in the international situation is what is worsening the situation. They are acting irresponsibly in consideration of their obligations to world humanity. Any detonation of a nuclear weapon anywhere would be a catastrophe for all of humanity. And so we have to remind them of their responsibilities. It's hard to force them, but I think by raising the level of moral norm around the world, putting pressure on them to explain why they are keeping each about 2,500 strategic nuclear weapons on hair trigger alert, meaning that they could be fired on 15 minutes notice. That is uncalled for, and public opinion in the world needs to be gathered to focus on how dangerous the present situation is. It's a danger that is compounded in another area by the emerging terrorism in the world and the possibility of terrorist use of nuclear weapons combined with the keeping nuclear weapons on alert. This double danger, I call it, a double danger to the world is mounting, and it's surprising to me that so many people and members of the public are oblivious to what we're passing through.
Terrorism was a central issue at the 2005 NPT Review Conference. The previous conference was in 2000. This was the first NPT Review Conference since the attack of 9/11, and the consequences and implications were still being absorbed. The 9/11 attack involved a strike against the most powerful nuclear nation in the world by an enemy armed only with carpet cutters and plane tickets. Yet, as was pointed out at the conference, against such an enemy, the massive American nuclear arsenal was not worth its weight in scrap. But the mere existence of nuclear weapons and the possibility of their theft or acquisition by terrorists has compounded the nuclear dilemma. Terrorist groups have openly stated that they are seeking nuclear weapons. And in several public statements, Osama bin Laden has pointedly cited the American bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as precedents to justify the use of such weapons against civilian populations.
Nuclear weapons cannot deter terrorists. A suicide bomber or an attacker armed with a carpet knife who is prepared to give his life for his cause cannot be deterred by any kind of threat, including a nuclear threat. On the contrary, the very existence of nuclear weapons and fissile materials from which to make them leaves the world more vulnerable to attack from non-state actors.
With the failure of the conference to achieve the necessary consensus, anger and determination grew among citizens' groups. Susie Snyder of the International Women's League for Peace and Freedom.
It appears that some governments, and in particular I refer to the United States, never wanted a success at this review conference.
This is a matter of great concern to us because this generation is failing to provide us, the next generation, with a world free of nuclear weapons. We do not want to inherit a world where nuclear weapons jeopardize our security, our environment, and our lives.
From New Zealand, Alan Ware, representing international lawyers and parliamentarians, made clear that the struggle will continue.
Thank you. We believe that states have not only a moral and a political responsibility to eliminate the threat of nuclear devastation, but also a legal responsibility to do so. We believe that states parties to the NPT are not implementing their obligations, and particularly under Article 6 to eliminate this threat. In 1992, we initiated a project to take a case to the World Court to declare that the threat or use of nuclear weapons was illegal and that there was an obligation to eliminate those nuclear weapons, and it was a successful case. The nuclear weapon states say they're implementing their obligations. We believe that they're not. So we are now, given the dire proceedings here at the NPT and the lack of implementation, we are now consulting with governments to look at returning to the court to look at the compliance issue of the nuclear weapon states, whether they are in compliance or not, and what they should do in order to be in compliance. Negotiations should happen through the NPT or through the Conference on Disarmament. They're not, so now we're consulting with governments to look at alternative paths to get the negotiations going. This could be through a General Assembly resolution which starts the negotiations. It could be through the nuclear weapon-free zones, who had their first conference just before the Non-Proliferation Treaty in Mexico, and we organised the civil society input into that. That was the first time the 108 states of the nuclear weapon-free zones have come together and they adopted a disarmament agenda. Or it could be through like-minded states, and we're undertaking consultations with governments for that. So we're not giving up just because of the lack of progress through the NPT. We believe nuclear disarmament is a political and moral responsibility, a legal responsibility. It's a practical possibility, and we're going to make sure it happens.
Hilda.
Well, that's really good. That's really good. I mean, Ware was really good. It can happen. We're going to make it happen. That was very dramatic. And Helen Caldecott is so great. She's been saying this for so long.
They are very powerful and very thoughtful figures. In fact, the smartest people around are not in the government. They're not in the administrations. They're among the people.
The people.
And they bring a perspective that is not concerned with nation state. They bring a truly global perspective.
Right.
They're aware that the threat is not to some particular group, some particular state, some particular city. It is a threat to the entire biosphere of the planet.
Yes, indeed. She said, Helen Caldecott said that. I'd done a program a couple of weeks ago, a month or so ago with Michio Kaku, and he said that the weapons of destruction are even more dangerous beyond just the human species. It could be possibly even, as Helen Caldecott said, the destruction of life.
Right.
Now, again, back to that original question of what is there as existentially significant as the technological capability to destroy ourselves that we've reached through our clever extension of our consciousness and technological instruments on the positive side that might be equally existentially significant, that might make peace possible in a way that it hasn't been. One of the things I'm interested in, we may actually have transcended in terms of our technologically augmented capability some or many, or opening upon the very concept of scarcity itself. Abundance may be something that's before us if we get our system in order in a way that's going to serve everyone with a proper understanding of the importance of the earth as an organism and so forth, a vision. And that vision doesn't seem to be among the leaders of the world so much as it might be sort of resonating in the consciousness of the people themselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? That there's something equally significant to the destructive scenario on the positive side, and I don't hear it voiced. What has changed in a positive sense that might well make the peace proposals possible, other than just say, let's be good or let's be moral, like our leaders have been telling us, our spiritual leaders since probably Cro-Magnon shamans and so forth. Yeah? What's different on the positive side that we could posit as a reason for why we can get out of the destructive scenario we've been in? That's a question that resonates with me.
Well, one of the things that is encouraging, and it's apparent at the NPT, is that there is such a huge and developing and rapidly expanding pool of human concern and intelligence being brought to bear on this.
Right.
Now, the problem are the leaders. And it's not even the leaders as a total group. The vast majority of the world's leaders desperate to get rid of nuclear weapons and are now acting to bring pressure on those 5 states, or if you will, the 10 countries that actually have nuclear weapons. If America decided to take the lead, then it could be done in a matter of, literally, certain things could be done in a matter of 36 hours. All the nuclear weapons in the world that are on hair trigger alert could be taken off alert in 36 hours, less than a week, and this could be verified. So it is not a technological problem. It isn't even an ideological problem here, because the idea of ideology of war and more bombs is passing, and the people
is passing.
The people now, the majority of the people do not want nuclear weapons. The majority of the people in the nuclear weapon states don't want nuclear weapons. The problem are the leaders in those nuclear weapons states, and it's not just the leaders.
It's some of the leaders.
It is the establishment. One of the problems with establishment is that these things outlive their death. Nation-state structures have outlived their death.
They have,
in
indeed,
certain
in
ways.
age of globalization.
We don't need a lot of senators and congressmen all going together in Washington to decide how everybody in this vast North American continent
and
should
the
behave.
world. And the world. They have
Indeed.
this idea of an ideology that serves everyone. Yeah,
that's right.
It's the danger.
And the idea that a nation can have nuclear weapons and the rest of the world and the neighboring countries, it's not their business. It is their business. It is all our business. And so a globalized world, a globalized ideology is emerging.
Yeah, right.
And I think that that's a very encouraging sign in the sense that the people are emerging as a force, a global planetary civilization is emerging. And so what do we need to do? We need a little bit of good luck.
Maybe, yeah, always. Luck helps.
Not a lot, just a little bit. If we'd got Kerry, as I said.
We did not.
We didn't. But it came close. Maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
If we can just hold off pushing the button.
Armageddon.
Until some leaders emerge in those 2 or 3 major nuclear powers. And, I mean, Tony Blair, for all his faults, has de-alerted the nuclear weapons in England.
All right.
He's taken them off a hair trigger alert, as they once were, of a few minutes, and moved them to a few days.
Okay.
He did it with no announcements, no fanfare. He just did it as an executive decision.
Now that would
this could be done.
Right. For the hardcore militarists would say, we are not going to make ourselves vulnerable to someone else. That's the way it's been all the time. We are not going to do it, and we are going to keep our weapons, and we're going to make sure nobody else has them.
Right.
I once saw Ted Turner, who I love in lots of ways, at the press club, big room in the press club, saying, hell, we got atomic weapons. We go around intimidating all the world. I think everyone ought to have an atomic bomb, you know, to bring a little equity into the world. Isn't it necessary that there be a vision of some sort of inclusion of all the people in a transformed world context of doing things that our leadership currently just simply does not provide? And we're looking for that. And where will it emerge from? Perhaps from the public intellectuals or from people giving a context where something is possible that historically has not been possible. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. I think we may have transcended scarcity, that we could take care of everyone in the planet, including the creatures, in a way that simply has not been available to us in the past. And that vision is going to have to emerge from somewhere. I don't think it'll emerge from the established powers that be that have authority over the system that's in place, because they're very advantaged by that system that's in place. Like the Angevin regime of Louis XVI thought they were legitimate. We think we're legitimate with our ideas. We got all the power, but we need to have something that's more inclusive. It seems to me it's a challenge of the vision that, like Bucky Fuller said, it's going to be touch and go right up to the final moment if we make it. But we're definitely at a time of qualitative transformation in the evolution of affairs, don't you think?
Given the fact that we are within the nation-state structures in those 5 nucleus of powers, they are controlled by parliaments or senates or Congress, and that's the structure that we have inherited. It's a legacy structure, and therefore we are dependent upon a leader emerging who will, within that structure, do what needs to be done.
Yeah, I wonder if I could. At the time of the demonstration against the war starting in Iraq, I think we're in a quagmire over there. I don't know how you feel, but it seems like that. There was the famous line by the New York Times saying there's 2 superpowers. There's the United States, hyperpower, the French call us, and then world public opinion.
Yes.
World public opinion is coalescing against many of the stances the United States is taking. There may be hope in that.
Enormous.
That there could be a real groundswell of human, energy if there was somewhere being enunciated an alternative to the way in which things have been done in the past. It may be that this thing like punctuated equilibrium in evolution, there's quantitative change, and then there's suddenly, we may be coming to a new kind of relationship in the cosmos, or an opening upon that. And so this is an incredible time to be alive and participate. Are you optimistic, pessimistic? What do you think?
Well, optimism is the only practical philosophy, so I'm optimistic.
Right.
And it was none other than Eisenhower who once said, sometimes people are going to want peace so much that maybe governments are just going to have to get out of the way and let them have it.
That's Mr. Eisenhower. He had a lot of other good ideas.
So it's encouraging.
It's the most important question confronting us all, and I really thank you for this film. It's really great. You're going to be getting this out now. It's just now more timely, I can't imagine, right here in the season of Hiroshima, that we all celebrate these, we make note of that. And thanks, Kevin, for coming in enormously and sharing with the audience. It's your pleasure to have had the perceptions then of Kevin Sanders. He's a communicator extraordinaire, I would like to say, in terms of helping the human society move in the right direction. He's got a new film, The People versus the Bomb, Showdown at the UN. It really is that. It's well documented in the film, and one and all are recommended to see it. Thanks a lot for coming in.
Thanks a lot. Good to talk with you.
My pleasure. We could talk for hours on those huge subjects. They're very important. But we invite you to tune in. We'll come back again tomorrow. That's it for now. One more time. Thanks a lot for that and for everything. Okay. So I don't know where, it's hard to know where to get a handle on all this, because it's such a big subject. I just am really looking for some, I like something has changed in the ontology. It's definitely changed where we can destroy the species. That's something new. Something new on the positive side has to emerge from somewhere, it seems to me.
Right. Well, people may rise to the challenge. The muddle through philosophy that somehow we'll muddle through in the past. Or muddle through again.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.